Dr. Bernard is the adjunct associate professor of medicine at George Washington University, and he's president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He has led numerous research studies investigating the effects of diet on various health issues, including a groundbreaking study of dietary intervention in type 2 diabetes funded by the NIH. He has authored more than 70 publications as well as 15 books, the most recent of which focuses on how to protect your memory. He has no personal, business, or financial conflict of interest to disclose, and so I'm going to turn this over to him.
Thank you for joining me today. You know, when we think of all the conditions that are related to aging, the last one that we want to get is Alzheimer's disease. And I have to say, when we take a look at where we're going with Alzheimer's disease, it's not a very pretty picture. When you look at the statistics on Alzheimer's disease, they are steadily rising. The rates are obviously rising very quickly, and Alzheimer's affects about half of us by age 85. And memory problems, of course, don't start out with Alzheimer's disease. It starts out as lapses, a memory lapse. And of course, anybody can have a memory lapse. You're at the grocery store and you see somebody at the end of the aisle, and you know that person, but their name eludes you, and you duck into the other aisle trying to think of their name, and of course there's somebody there you ought to know. These lapses occur to everybody. But if they're happening every day, throughout the day, then we call that mild cognitive impairment. That's not normal, but it's unfortunately a common condition. And then when we see more things going wrong, learning and memory, reasoning, problem solving, visual spatial ability. In other words, I say, can you draw a face or draw a clock? Can you get the pieces in the right configuration? If language starts to go bad, and finally if personality starts to change, we look at the possibility that this might be Alzheimer's disease. And when we speak about Alzheimer's disease, so many people think about the risk factor is genetics. And that's true. You know about the ApoE epsilon 4 allele. If you got it from one parent, your risk is tripled. If you got it from both parents, your Alzheimer's risk is 10 to 15 times higher than people who do not have that gene. So what do? Get new parents, right? I don't think so. Now, let me talk to you about how we remember things, what goes wrong, and a surprising source of hope. I now believe that we have tremendous power related to Alzheimer's disease that even a few years ago we didn't understand that we have. I want to communicate this with you. I hope you'll share it with everybody you know, because we are in a completely new era in Alzheimer's disease. Okay, we're going to start here. Do you see that red crescent in the middle of this slide? That's the hippocampus. The hippocampus is Latin for seahorse. This will be on the test. And some imaginative anatomist years ago thought, that looks kind of like a seahorse. Well, the hippocampus is important because it decides what is worth remembering. It's the memory triage, if you will. Things that are not worth remembering, it discards. Things that are worth remembering, it saves. So you're at a restaurant and the waiter comes up and says, hello, my name is Kelly. The hippocampus says, I don't think so. We're going to let that go, but things that really matter, they go up to the cerebral hemispheres, and you don't get a new brain cell for every new memory. If you did that, you'd have to have your brain in a wheelbarrow. What you do is you get stronger connections between the brain cells. The brain connections are getting stronger and stronger. Now, if you look inside the brain of a person with Alzheimer's disease, as you're well aware, we see abnormalities. And these beta amyloid plaques look sort of like little balls of yarn or little meatballs in between the cells. What are they? Well, they're composed of beta amyloid, which is a protein that is squeezing out of brain cells. That happens. But then they start to collect in these little plaques called beta amyloid plaques, and that's not normal. Or I should say the major accumulation of that is not a normal process. You could think of it a little bit like an old-fashioned sausage maker squeezing out protein strands and then getting stuck into these little beta amyloid plaques between the cells. So what can we do about this? Anybody know what this is? This is Chicago. And in 1993, the Chicago Health and Aging Project got started. And what they wanted to do was to track diet habits among people in Chicago and to see who stayed mentally clear and who does not. And I want to tell you the first thing that they keyed in on was something I knew all about. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. Anybody been there? Well, you've seen the movie, I know that, okay. So anyway, when I was growing up, my mother had 5 kids. We would wake up to the smell of bacon. And my mother would be down in the kitchen taking a fork and pulling the bacon strips out of the pan, putting them on a paper towel to cool down. And then when that pan was filled with just that hot bacon grease, you don't want to throw that away. That's good bacon grease, right? So my mother would pour it into a jar to save it. And that jar of bacon grease never went into the refrigerator. Just went on the shelf. Because my mother knew that as bacon grease cools down, what happens to it? It solidifies, right? It turns into this waxy solid. That is a sign that it is loaded with saturated fat, bad fat, the fat that raises your cholesterol level. And by the way, the next day she would spoon that bacon grease back into the frying pan and fry eggs in it. It's amazing that any of her children lived to adulthood, but that's the way we lived. Saturated fat is, its principal source is dairy products, cheese, milk, butter, loaded with saturated fat. It's also in meats, in eggs, and a number of other foods. So in Chicago, some people ate relatively little saturated fat, some ate more. And the researchers at the Chicago Health and Aging Project said, do these two groups differ in their Alzheimer's risk? And as years went by, they tracked who developed Alzheimer's and who didn't. Let me just show you the numbers, okay? Very important. Okay, there's the low group, there's a high group. The people getting 25 grams of saturated fat per day had, what's that, 3.5 times the risk of getting Alzheimer's disease compared to the people who generally avoided saturated fat. Okay, very, very important. Now, if you add it up, it's pretty easy to get in that high group. 2 eggs have 3 grams of saturated fat. 1 strip of bacon has another gram, and do you know anyone who has just 1 strip of bacon? A chicken thigh, even without the skin, 4.5 grams. A glass of whole milk, another 4.5 grams. Pizza for 1, 12 grams. Let's add that up. 25.5 grams. I'm already in the high-risk group. Do you know people who eat these foods? Let me tell you something. Your patients are eating these foods, and they are all in the high-risk group if the Chicago statistics apply to them. Okay, but it's not just Alzheimer's. In Finland, researchers tracked over 1,000 adults. They were 50 years old when the study started. They looked at their diets, and then they looked to see who developed mild cognitive impairment. Now, some of the people had a low saturated fat diet. Some had a higher saturated fat diet. Same kind of comparison as we made in Chicago, and let's look at the numbers. Okay, same story, that it's not just Alzheimer's risk, but your risk of having more mild memory problems in older age, much higher if you're eating more saturated fat. What about that gene, though? What if I have that ApoE epsilon 4 allele? Well, let's now limit the results to just those people, okay? Some people low in saturated fat, some people high. Let's run the numbers. Here they are. Okay, what this means, look closely at this slide. What this means is that if you have that gene and you eat a high saturated fat diet, your risk of developing mild cognitive impairment is really high. But if you have that gene and you don't eat the saturated fat, look what happens. Your risk is cut by 80%. This is critically important. Those people who thought genes will just condemn me, genes are not destiny. There are some genes that are dictators. The genes that say blue eyes, brown hair, those are dictators. They give orders, and you're going to have blue eyes or brown hair. The genes for Alzheimer's disease are not dictators. They're more like committees. And they make suggestions. They're not making an order, they're making a suggestion. You could get Alzheimer's if. And as a matter of fact, there are many disease genes that are just like that. The diabetes genes. Do they tell you you are going to have diabetes? No. What they say is you could have diabetes if you eat in a certain way, and you're sedentary. And so, in other words, lifestyle changes can sometimes arm wrestle with those genes and keep them from expressing themselves, at least to a degree. Are you with me? Genes are not destiny. That's very, very important. So for any of your patients who say, I'm condemned, I've got the gene, I'm homozygous for ApoE, epsilon 4, well, let's start changing our diet. Let's see what we can do. Okay, but we're just getting started. We're looking at things that we can do to reduce our risk, okay? Oh, what's this stuff? Trans fats. Okay, so if I have a cupcake or I've got a donut, that's not saturated fat for the most part. That's trans. You're familiar with trans fats, right? Okay, some people in Chicago know what a donut is, and some people are kind of avoiding it. Now, I got a low group, I got a high group. Let's run those numbers. Okay? All right. The trans fats are as bad as the saturated fats, maybe even worse. Okay? So if I'm avoiding trans fats, look what I'm doing. I'm dramatically reducing my risk. So all we're doing is we're adding up the things that we can do to protect the brain against Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment, this whole spectrum of memory problems. All right? Why? Why would bad fat affect the brain? You know it affects the heart, right? You know that if you have a high saturated fat diet, that causes your cholesterol level to rise. That's going to assault the heart, right? Everyone, we've known that for a generation. Researchers at Kaiser Permanente looked at whether that might be the explanation for Alzheimer's. They brought in almost 10,000 individuals, and they tracked their serum cholesterol levels, and they categorized them from low to high. And then they looked at the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, and they saw exactly this pattern, that if you had a low cholesterol level, you had a low risk. If you had a higher cholesterol level, your risk of developing Alzheimer's was higher. And if you had the highest cholesterol levels, your risk of Alzheimer's was the highest. So what we think is happening is that in the same way that cholesterol circulating in your blood attacks the heart, something about a high cholesterol level attacks the brain too. Now, we don't know exactly what that is, but we're gradually learning. It may be that cholesterol has something to do with beta amyloid deposition, or it may be that it affects the tau proteins. We don't yet know, but what we know is that you don't want to be in that high cholesterol group. And here's the scary part. Those cholesterol levels that they took were when the participants were about 40 years of age. Okay, so if you're thinking about whether to slather the mayo on your sandwich now or to have a bacon for breakfast, now is the time to make some changes, okay? That said, I don't believe there's ever a time when it's too late. All right? Okay. So let's add it up. I'm living in Chicago, I'm eating bacon and all these kinds of things, I'm at high risk. Can I change my diet? Can I make some changes? Sure. Of course I can, absolutely. Let's see what I can do. Have you tasted almond milk? You tasted almond? How is it? It's okay, right? Okay, well, it happens to have no saturated fat. So I'm getting rid of the cow's milk, I'm bringing in the almond milk, and I'm going to rerun my numbers. And if the Chicago statistics apply to me, I've just cut my risk. So I threw out 4.5 grams of saturated fat. I'm doing better. Can I change some more things on this slide? I can? Yes. Let's get rid of the bacon. We're going to have veggie bacon. It's sort of a liberal interpretation of the original. We're going to get rid of the eggs. We're going to have a bowl of oatmeal with some strawberries and blueberries. Out goes the chicken thigh. In comes the vegetable sandwich. Let's rerun my numbers. I'm doing better. So all I'm doing is I'm identifying the foods that have saturated fat. Animal fat, you can think of it. And I'm getting rid of them, and I'm substituting a plant-based option because, for the most part, they don't have the saturated fat, or it's dramatically reduced. Is there more that I can do? What else can I do? Oh, that pizza. Can I get a pizza without cheese? Well, yes, I can. There it is. Okay, well, let's see how I do. Well, I don't know, because nobody in Chicago eats that well. Well, actually, as a matter of fact, there are some people who do eat that well. In Loma Linda, California, there are a lot of Seventh-day Adventists who, by church teachings, the Adventist church says don't smoke, don't drink alcohol, avoid caffeine, and don't eat meat. And almost all Adventists are very good at the first three. In other words, they're health-conscious, non-smoking people, but some eat meat, some don't. So if you look at the health-conscious, non-smoking meat eaters, and you see their gradual decline over time, you compare it now to the health-conscious, non-smoking vegetarians, the vegetarians do better. So now this group is by and large probably ovo-lacto, so they're, in other words, they're having cheese and milk, but nonetheless they do better just by getting away from meat. All right, there's something else lurking in those plaques. We've been talking about the beta amyloid protein and cholesterol, that's in there, but it turns out there are traces of metals. There is iron, and there's copper. in the brain. Yes, when you analyze brain samples of people who have died with Alzheimer's disease, you see metal in the brain. Now, where are we getting them? Well, you got a cast iron pan? Who's got a cast iron pan? Okay, let's say I'm using it every day and a little iron is getting into my bloodstream. Well, think about this. I take my cast iron pan. I go out to the backyard and we're having a backyard barbecue, and I go back inside, and a week later, it occurs to me that I left my cast iron pan outside and it rusted. Okay, that rust is oxidation. What if I've got a copper penny? Does it stay shiny forever and ever? No, it oxidizes too. Well, iron in foods, copper in foods, in your body, they oxidize. Now, I know it sounds funny. Iron in my body will oxidize. Iron's rusting in my body. Yes, it is oxidizing. And as these metals oxidize, they produce free radicals. You've heard about free radicals. These are these malicious molecules that are sort of like sparks, basically tearing through the connections between cells. So where am I getting all these metals? Well, if you got a cast iron pan, if you're using it once a month, who cares? But if it's your go-to pan every day, you're getting extra iron in your diet, iron you don't need in the vast majority of cases. Most Americans are iron overloaded, okay? Especially women after the age of menopause, and men at just about any age, they're getting probably too much iron. Copper pipes, do you have copper pipes? Well, the water sits in it all night long. You fill your coffee maker in the morning, and that copper goes into it, and you're getting copper overloaded. Are you a meat eater? Are you eating liver? These foods not only have fat and cholesterol and the occasional salmonella and E. coli, but they are going to give you way too much iron, way too much copper. Do you take a multiple vitamin? Well, multiple vitamins are good in that they have vitamin B12, which, as you know, is important for the brain and other things, and they have some other vitamins that you might be low in. But to make you buy them, they say, we've got everything you need. So not just the vitamins, but we have iron in there. We have copper and the other minerals. The problem is you're getting iron and copper from foods. If it's in your multiple vitamin, you are probably overdosing. Now, the people who make Centrum products know, they learned a long time ago that they wanted to leave the iron out, because they knew that by the time people reach 50, the vast majority have way too much iron, or plenty of iron anyway. But they still leave the copper in. So I hate to say it, I think the vitamin manufacturers are about 20 years behind the science. So what I've been suggesting is that iron and copper that we're getting through our diet oxidize and produce free radicals that are like sparks burning through the connections between cells. If that is true, then we need a fire extinguisher to put out that fire, and we have it. It's called vitamin E. You know about vitamin E. Vitamin E is an antioxidant. And antioxidants neutralize free radicals. Now, it's in spinach, it's in mangoes, and there's a lot of it in nuts and seeds. And in Chicago, some people kind of skip all of those healthy foods. They are low in vitamin E. Some people are higher in vitamin E. Now, if my hypothesis is right, then people who are not getting much vitamin E should have a higher risk of Alzheimer's, because they can't stop that free radical assault on their brain. Let's run the numbers. All right, there you go. The people who are avoiding these vitamin E-rich foods have double the risk of Alzheimer's compared to the people who are eating them regularly. So again, we're just adding up things that will help us, getting away from the saturated fat, getting away from the trans fats. Now it's those vitamin E-rich foods. What are those? Well, broccoli, spinach, sweet potatoes, mangoes, avocados, and there's a especially large amount in nuts and in seeds, okay? Lots and lots and lots. Now, very important, you can go to the store and you can buy a vitamin E supplement. Don't do that. Why? Because in nature there are 8 forms of vitamin E. In a pill, there can be 1 form. Maybe 2, and if you overdo it on 1 form of vitamin E, it will suppress your absorption of the other forms. So there are certain vitamins that are good in a pill. Vitamin B12 is actually better in a pill. It's more absorbable in a pill form than it is in food. But vitamin E is not like that. So you don't want it in you don't want it in a supplement form. You want it in food. Okay? So in the Chicago study, about 8 milligrams per day was the effective dose. 1 ounce of nuts or seeds has about 5. Now, An ounce of nuts or seeds, pour them into the palm of your hand. By the time it hits your fingers, that's more than an ounce, okay? So an ounce of nuts or seeds every day is probably a good idea. The second tip that I have for you on this, though, is don't put it in your mouth. Because if you do, you are going to say, those cashews were just delicious. I'll have a little bit more. And I'll have a little bit more. And I'll have, you know what I'm talking about. These nuts are kind of addicting. And so what do you do instead? What you do is you pour them in your hand and crumble them up and put them on your salad. Or put them on your pancakes or something like that. You use them as a flavoring. And that way you'll get the benefit without the likelihood of overdose, okay? So by now you're probably saying, all right, I get it. Avoid the bad fats, bring in the healthy vitamins. That sounds kind of like the Mediterranean diet. And as a matter of fact, when you look at Mediterranean regions, they drink a fair amount of wine. And wine drinkers, if you're drinking in moderation, a glass or two a day, you have less risk of Alzheimer's compared to other people. However, there are some serious risks of alcohol consumption, not the least of which is breast cancer. Women who drink a glass of wine every day, even just one drink a day, have significantly higher risk of breast cancer compared to women who don't drink at all. So researchers in Cincinnati said, wait a minute. Oh, by the way, when I was in college, I think some of my roommates felt that they were on the Mediterranean diet, judging by what we saw on their shelves. Researchers in Cincinnati said, wait, maybe it's not the alcohol. Maybe it's the grape. Maybe there's something about the grape that is helping protect people. So they brought in a group of people. The average age was 78. Everyone had mild cognitive impairment. And what they tested was grape juice. A pint a day. Now that's a fair amount, but they asked them to drink this, and for 3 months they showed that learning was improved and recall was improved. Now wait a minute, that's too easy. How could that happen? Well, think about it. A grape has a rough life. A grape is sitting on the vine. It's exposed to the elements, sunlight, all day long. It has no protection. Or does it? Well, what's that dark purple color in a grape? That is what is, those are compounds called anthocyanins. And anthocyanins are powerful antioxidants. They protect the grape. So if it's the anthocyanins that are the effective factor, then other foods that have anthocyanins in them ought to help too, like blueberries, for example. Well, let's go back into the lab. Let's bring in a new group of people. Let's give them blueberry juice. And you know what? That's what they did at Cincinnati, and they found exactly the same result. Better learning, better recall. What does this mean? Does this mean I should drink a pint of grape juice every day or a pint of blueberry juice every day? No, that's not the message. That's what you do in a research study. In day-to-day life, what we ought to do, in my view, is to recognize that the colors in fruits and vegetables, they get their color from antioxidants. And the human retina has evolved to identify antioxidants. Think of this. You go into the grocery store, and you can see that bright orange color in a carrot, which is what? Beta carotene, right? That's a powerful antioxidant. Same thing in sweet potatoes. You can see it at 300 yards. You look at a red tomato. What is that red color? That's lycopene. That's an even more powerful antioxidant. And then you can see the purple in the grapes and the blueberries. Those are anthocyanins. And if your cat were to walk into the grocery store with you, your cat would have no interest in that whatsoever because the cat's retina does not have the same color vision that you do. But your cat is a carnivore. So your cat is very sensitive to motion. And that's what your cat is drawn to, the little mouse off scuttering in the corner. The human retina has the ability to identify antioxidants. You don't just have color vision for fun. You have color vision to attract us to foods that are good for us. And of course we take those colors now and we put them in an M&M's bag, but we have forgotten that the real function is for us to be able to identify and be attracted to healthful foods. All right? Okay, so the power plate. This is a diagram that the Physicians Committee created back in 2009 to suggest that the healthy foods are not meats and cheeses and eggs and donuts. The healthy foods are fruits, grains, vegetables, and legumes. What are legumes? Legumes, beans, peas, lentils, foods that grow in a pod. So fruits, grains, vegetables, legumes. What you notice about this is there is effectively no saturated fat. And they are extremely rich in protective nutrients, the antioxidants, okay? So you might be saying, well, I don't know anybody who eats that way. Well, some people do. This is Okinawa. Anybody been to Okinawa? If you go to Okinawa, you see something interesting. It's at the very bottom of Japan. And in the middle of this slide, that's Masu. She is the mother of a friend of mine. My friend runs a Japanese restaurant, and she shared with me a picture of her mother, Masu. And Masu lives in Okinawa. Okinawa is famous for the fact that it has more centenarians, people who live to be 100. It has more of them than any place else on Earth. What are they eating in Okinawa? What's the dietary staple of Okinawa? It is not fish. It's not rice. It's not even tofu. It's sweet potatoes. Massive amounts of sweet potatoes. Day in, day out. They're eating huge amounts, and Masu eats them too. And here is Masu at age 88. Here she is at 100. By the way, when you're 100, they throw you a party, and you have to share it with everybody else who turned 100. They have lots and lots and lots of centenarians. This is Dr. Ellsworth Wareham. And back in World War II, he was on an American destroyer going right by Okinawa, and he didn't know Masu and she didn't know him, but they ate almost the same way. And the reason is he grew up on a farm in Alberta, and he had the job of milking the cows. And he would bring the bucket of milk in when he was done, and his parents noticed that he wouldn't drink it. He said, Ellsworth, have some milk. He'd say, I don't think so. And they said, well, why not? He said, oh, I saw where it came from. It didn't seem very hygienic to this fastidious young man. And when it came to eggs, well, that was even worse. So very early in his life, he became a vegetarian. And he ate very simple foods. He ate beans and grains and vegetables and fruits. And what was remarkable about Dr. Wareham is not just that he was a very busy surgeon. When he finished medical school, he became a surgeon. He did a tour of duty in Vietnam. Came back, he was decorated first by, there he is standing to the right of LBJ, and there he is being decorated again by President Nixon. What was most remarkable about Dr. Wareham was that when he reached 65, he decided not to retire. He said, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm at the top of my game. I think I'll work for a couple more years. And he hit 66, and 67, and 68, and 69, and he still didn't retire. And he decided, if I hit 95, then I'm going to retire. That's what he did. At age 95, he decided to retire. And he said, okay, guys, I got to quit. And the other surgeon said, where are you going? You've got more experience than all of us put together. You got a steady hand. You can't leave. And he said, I'm 95. What patient is going to have confidence in a 95-year-old surgeon? I got to quit. He's now 100 years old. I just had lunch with Dr. Wareham not too long ago. And I got to tell you, he's doing surgery on his bushes now. He's got the most manicured lawn you have ever seen. But the point I'm making is whether you're Masu eating sweet potatoes or you're Dr. Wareham eating green beans and lima beans and spaghetti with simple tomato sauce and things like that, these simple foods and avoiding the unhealthy foods, it's not just a theoretical benefit. It's real physical benefit in whether you're doing well or not. Well, are there extra benefits from avoiding all those bad fats? If I'm leaving out the saturated fat and the trans fats to protect my brain, is there anything else that's going to do for me? Well, the answer is yes. This is important. A gram of fat has 9 calories. Now, to picture this, a thimble, a sewing thimble, if I fill it 1/3 full of fat, that's a gram, and that's 9 calories. But a gram of carbohydrate has only 4 calories. That's really important. So many people are saying, don't eat carbs. Carbs are fattening. People who have that attitude are going to end up overweight because they are indulging in fatty foods that have twice the calories. Think about Japan. When they were at their skinniest, before McDonald's ever invaded, what was their dietary staple? They were eating massive amounts of rice. Huge, very high carbohydrate diet, the thinnest people on the planet. And once the burgers and the nuggets and the cheese push the rice off the plate, you see higher incidence of diabetes and other problems, which we're going to get to in a minute, okay? So this is a man named Jean Remy who sent me these pictures from Canada because he was at 320 pounds. And his doctor said, you've got type 2, you're going to have type 2 diabetes. He was pre-diabetic on the verge of diabetes. And he read about some research that we had done using a plant-based diet, a totally vegan diet for type 2 diabetes. And it did not say to avoid carbs. It said eat beans and vegetables and fruits and whole grains and skip the meats, follow a plant-based diet. By the time he got to chapter 4 of our book, he had lost 160 pounds, and his energy level was through the roof. It's a good way to go. This is Jenna, same story. She wanted to lose some weight, and she did not count calories or avoid carbs. She got away from the bad fats and the foods that contain it, the cheeses and the meats and so forth. And she got her waistline back. She got her confidence back, but most importantly, she got her health back. Okay. Food is not everything. It's important to lace up your sneakers every now and then. Get a little bit of exercise. At the University of Illinois, researchers tested the effects of exercise in 120 adults. A brisk walk 3 times per week. And the results after a year was a reversal of brain shrinkage and improved memory. And the brain shrinkage that was reversed was specifically in the hippocampus, which is Latin for seahorse. Who's had her asparagus today? Very good. Okay. All right. So I have my own exercise tips that I would share with you. Arrive at the airport as late as possible. Carry massively heavy luggage and just run for the plane. I do that about 3 times a week. Now, that's not what they did at the University of Illinois. They had their own approach, which was begin with a 10-minute walk. This is not a trudge. This is a brisk walk. And then every week you add 5 minutes. So the second week it's 15 minutes 3 times a week, then 20 3 times a week, then 25. Once you get up to 40 minutes, that's it. That's the level that has been shown to reverse brain shrinkage. Now, is more better? Sure. But 40-minute brisk walk is something that everybody can do. Cognitive exercise, intellectual exercise, may also be helpful. This was discovered in Canada. Some people in Canada speak 2 languages, and those people delay cognitive decline by about 5 years. You got 2 words for everything. So you're really using the connections between the cells. So intellectual activity is a good idea. All right? So what kind of intellectual activity can you do? Well, documentaries, newspapers, things that challenge the brain. This is the newspaper I read, but you might have your own choices. The more that we're really challenging the brain, the better off we're going to be. And words are especially useful. Crosswords, anagrams. I was sitting in a lecture a few years ago thinking about this. The lecture was being given by Dr. Dean Ornish. Do you know Dean Ornish's work? He's a medical genius, a Harvard-trained physician, now at the University of California in San Francisco. He showed that a plant-based diet, a completely vegetarian diet, can reverse heart disease. It makes the arteries open up again, which is a really good thing. But anyway, I was sitting in a lecture he was giving, and he showed this slide, and he said, when you're making a diet change, get the group to support you. Because if I just focus on myself, if I focus just on I will be ill. But if I focus on we, if I focus on the group and get the support of the group, I can be well. And that was a very good point. But while he was making that point, my brain was going somewhere else. I thought, isn't that cool? There are words hidden in other words. And this is probably good for your brain to identify them. So you could take any word, like this word, and start rearranging the letters, and you can see what you come up with. And it's amazing to see what happens. So trust me, this is good for your brain. Just kidding. Okay. All right. So there are programs for doing this in a more organized way. You've heard of Lumosity, where, oh, hello, Dave. Let's see, I remember what you ordered last time you were at my restaurant. And if you remember his name and what he ordered, you get a tip. Or how many words begin with D-I-G. What these programs are designed for is memory, reaction time, and problem solving. And Lumosity is the best known, but there are many other companies that have these programs. Check them out. You can usually try them out for free, just a few minutes a day. You're doing your brain some good, okay? We've talked about food. We've talked about exercise, physical exercise, and cognitive exercise. Let's say a word about medication. This is Dwayne Gravlin. Dwayne Gravlin was a NASA astronaut in training, also a physician. Got home from work one day, and there was a woman standing outside his house. He said, "Can I help you?" She looked at him and said, "Dwayne, I'm your wife." He didn't recognize his own wife. They pack him into the car, they race off to the emergency room, they say there's something seriously wrong with Dwayne's memory. And they evaluated him, he had huge gaps in his memory. Why? He was a healthy guy. Well, he had started a medication about a month earlier, and the medication was atorvastatin, marketed as Lipitor. And as we all know, statins are perfectly safe, and so that couldn't be the issue, but he stopped his statin, and his memory cleared up. So a little bit later, he started it again at half the dose, and within a month, his memory was wiped out. Everything was gone after about age 12 or 13. So the Lipitor now in the trash. His experience was relayed to the Food and Drug Administration, which has since that time had hundreds of cases of statin-induced memory disorder. Now, I'm not here to say that you should never take a statin. But what I am here to say is that 90% of people on statins, in my view, do not need them. They have high cholesterol that is caused by food. And if instead the meat and the cheese and the eggs and the junk food was taken off their plate, their cholesterol levels would fall and you wouldn't even have a discussion about statins. What we are using is an expensive, risky treatment to try to undo the effects of foods. And that is a pattern that we see with diabetes, with hypertension, with lipid problems, and many other things. And statins aren't benign. Statins increase the risk of muscle problems, liver problems. They increase the risk of diabetes quite significantly. And they also seem to make people eat more. Somehow we see that statin users gain weight. Now, don't get me wrong. A low cholesterol level is a good thing, and if you haven't been able to get your cholesterol down, statins are a sensible choice. But the point that I'm making is don't start there. And all of you clinicians know this is true. Any patient who has an acute change in mental status, the first thing you want to do is go into the bathroom and open up the medicine cabinet and see what is new. Because medicines are a leading cause of mental status changes. Sometimes it's medications that would be benign by themselves, but in combination, they're causing problems. Okay? So let's check our scorecard. Can I avoid bad fats? Sure. Now that I know where they are. Can I avoid excess metals? Yes, I can. How about vitamin-rich foods like vegetables and fruits and vitamin B12? Can I take a B12 supplement? This is easy. Can I get physical activity? Yeah, I guess if I schedule it and you have somebody to go with so that you can't cancel, yes, you can do it. Can I get mental stimulation? You're getting that already. Sleep is very important. I don't care how good your book is, 10 o'clock at night, go to sleep. Medications, we can take all of these into account. And these will give us power to deal with Alzheimer's. Now, my group, as I mentioned, the Physicians Committee, devised the power plate to suggest that we no longer need a meat group and a dairy group and an egg group. These are the healthful staples of life. We sent this to the USDA in 2009, and did you see what the USDA released in 2011? This is called My Plate. This is now federal policy. I'm not taking any credit for this, but federal policy is now there is no meat group anymore. There is a protein group which could be meat, but if you're getting your protein from beans or nuts or tofu or something else, perfectly fine. And they've added a dairy group, but to their credit, it includes soy milk. So the main parts of the diet are fruits and grains and vegetables, and I'm going to say the legume group as well, all right? So by now you might be saying, Dr. Barnard, are you suggesting that I should throw out the meat and the dairy and the eggs? Should I become a vegetarian? Should I adopt a vegan diet? The answer is yes. That's the healthiest way to go. And I could just hear what you're thinking. You're saying, great, if I did that, I'd probably be healthy, but I would have to live in my garage because my family is going to divorce me if I eat that way. Well, let me share with you. We have done a number of studies on this, and hundreds of people. And the benefits are huge. Diabetes improves, sometimes it even goes away. Cholesterol levels fall, sometimes the arteries open up again. People lose more weight and they keep it off more effectively than any other diet. And here's how we introduce this diet, and I have never seen anyone unable to do this. Step one, check out the possibilities. Don't change your diet. You're not ready to change your diet. You have to take a week to check out the possibilities. And what I mean is, over the next week, you're going to take my piece of paper that says breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and fill it out. Think of plant-based options that you actually like. So, okay, oatmeal, tastes like wallpaper paste. So I've got to put cinnamon and raisins on it to make it good. Okay, blueberry pancakes, that's not punishment, and I guess I can leave off the butter. But the maple syrup, that's okay. Okay, fine. I never made scrambled tofu. I'll test it, and if I don't like it, I'm not writing it down. But if I like it, I'm going to keep it. On to lunch. I'll have my chunky vegetable chili or chuck wagon stew, or I'll have my pizza without the cheese. You're going to try different things. And if you go to an Italian restaurant, try the spaghetti or the angel hair pasta with the artichoke hearts and wild mushrooms and chunky tomato sauce instead of the meat sauce and cheese sauce. Mexican, they're more than happy to make you a bean burrito or veggie fajitas or beans and rice. Chinese, very easy. They've got lots of rice dishes and vegetable dishes, and tofu dishes. Extra points for Japanese, because when you have that veggie sushi, it's not only it's not only skips all the animal products, but it's also very low in oil. And if your patients are eating out at a submarine sandwich place, they're more than happy to leave off the meat and the cheese. They'll fill it with lettuce and tomatoes and cucumbers and olives and spinach, and they'll drizzle some red wine vinegar over it. They'll toast it for you and call it Veggie Delight. The taco place may not be the pinnacle of culinary art, but they're more than happy to leave off the meat and the cheese and give you a bean burrito. Okay, fine. So you take a week. You just check out the possibilities and you say, all right, 7 days later, I could come up with a vegan breakfast that's actually okay. And a lunch and a dinner, and if we're going out to eat, I think I know how to handle that. Now, step 2, 3-week test drive. We're going to do a 3-week test drive of all vegan all the time, all plant-based all the time. Because I'm avoiding those darn saturated fats, there's no trans fats, I'm going to be high in vitamin E, high in all those antioxidants, I'm going to see how I like this. No long-term commitment, we're just doing it for 3 weeks. At the end of that time, 2 things will have happened. The first is, you're healthier. You're losing weight. If you have diabetes, your blood sugar is coming down, your blood pressure is coming down, your cholesterol is down, your energy is better, you're feeling a lot better. But the second thing that happens is your tastes are changing. And you don't expect that to happen. But let me ask you, how many people listening to this program ever switched from whole milk to skim milk or low-fat milk? How many? Okay, all right. When you did, what was the low-fat milk like at the beginning? Watery? Doesn't even look right. It's kind of bluish. Well, how many of you got used to that after a while? Okay, you got used to it. Did you ever go back? Did you then taste whole milk again? It's too thick. It's like cream. Well, wait a minute. Your whole life it was fine. You never objected to the taste. You just got away from it because you wanted to be healthier. And when you're away from it consistently for a few weeks, your taste buds physically change. They no longer want that fatty stuff, and for the rest of your life, you're just past that. Somebody could say, oh, wouldn't you just kill for a glass of whole milk? And the answer is no. I'm past that. The first week on a vegan diet, it will seem light. You're going to say to yourself, do I have to acquire a taste for folk music now? Okay, break out the tie-dye on vegans. Well, the second week, it starts to make sense. You've discovered some foods you like, and you discover there are DVDs and books and websites and cool products at the store. You're trying them, and you're having fun. After about 3 or 4 weeks, if you went back and you have the double bacon cheeseburger, you'll discover it is not the joyful experience you remembered. It seems greasy. It doesn't seem as imaginative as the food you've been eating. You're just past that. But at this point, you're not at that stage yet. But you'll discover this. There are transition foods you can eat if you want. Instead of Jimmy Dean, you can have Gimme Lean. There are like the vegan sausages and whatever. You don't have to have them, but they're there. Supplements, B12, everybody should supplement B12. Everybody should supplement B12. If you're on a vegan diet, it's absolutely mandatory. Because it's not made by animals, it's not made by plants, it's made by bacteria. But everyone should supplement B12. A lot of people are low. If you're treated with metformin, if you're on an acid blocker, chances are you're running low, okay? Vitamin D comes from the sun, but you're not in the sun. So if you're avoiding sunlight, about 2,000 IUs a day of vitamin D makes sense. That's really it, okay? A couple of resources really quickly. At our website, pcrm.org, that's the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, pcrm.org, we have a free non-commercial program called the 21-Day Kickstart. And every day you get an email from Alicia Silverstone or some other celebrity with menus and recipes and cooking videos. There's a free app. And for 21 days, you're going to get an introduction to a plant-based diet in English, Spanish, Mandarin. We also have one for people from the Indian subcontinent with Indian foods. And let me encourage you to go to the new website called Kickstart Little Rock that will share with you local resources that you can take advantage of. Okay, the last thing that I just want to say really quickly is I hope you found this useful, but the people who need this information the most are not in this room. The people who need this information the most are 12 years old, and they're in school eating chicken nuggets and pizza. And on the way home, they stop at the store and they pick up a soda and some candy. And when they get home, their parents give them more pizza because it's frozen, it's really quick, and everybody's busy, and children now accept that obesity is something that you just have. They turn on the TV, they see commercials for snack foods, burgers piled high. The other half of the commercials are for medicines to try to counteract the effects of the foods. And your 7-year-old daughter comes into the kitchen and says, "Mom, what's an erection lasting more than 4 hours?" This is the world we are giving to our children, okay? They think it's normal to have diseases. They think it's normal to take medications. This is not the world we should be living, and it's caused by food more than any other factor. But I'm optimistic that we can change, because a generation ago I was sitting in my hospital, the George Washington University Hospital, and I'll end with this. We are having a discussion about smoking. Can we ban smoking in the hospital? Should we ban it in the doctor's lounge? Should we tell our patients they can't smoke? This was controversial at the time, but we made the decision to ban it, and within 2 weeks we realized that was what we had to do. And every hospital and every business and every airline and every government office has all banned smoking, and we just thought, why didn't we do this a long time ago? The only reason we were slow, we all knew we had a problem with cigarettes, but we just thought we had time. You can quit eventually. That's where we are today with food. We know we've got a problem. We know the things that we're serving to our families not necessarily the best. But when do I deal with it? The time to deal with it is now. And the way to deal with it is not to moralize and not wag your finger, but to have fun with it. Try new recipes, new books, new websites, new products, and when you find something you like, make some noise, share it with your patients. Don't be afraid. You tell your patients about smoking, tell them about diet too, and then give them resources to support them in the change. Refer them to a good registered dietitian. You're going to change their life, and they're going to thank you for it, as will I. Thank you very much. The question is, what about cholesterol? Are we concerned about total cholesterol, or are we looking at ratios? I look at both, but the best indicator is the ratio. So you're looking at the ratio of, say, total cholesterol. There are different ways of doing the ratio, but the most common probably is total to HDL, or good cholesterol, and you want it roughly 3 to 1. Okay, the question is, what about aluminum? Is aluminum a contributor to Alzheimer's disease? It's a controversy, and the controversy, in my view, is not yet settled. There are many, many good neurologists who say it's a complete non-issue, but there are others who say it is an issue. And the way it started is that a number of counties in England that had aluminum in the water had about 50% more Alzheimer's compared to other counties. The research was repeated in France. They found the same finding. Aluminum is a clear-cut brain toxin. When you see industrial accidents where people are exposed to large amounts of aluminum, it causes brain damage. And lastly, aluminum is not required in human biology. There is zero requirement. So there are others who say, no, I would discount it, I wouldn't worry about it. My view is, while they are fighting it out, just avoid it. And it's easy to avoid aluminum. It's in drinking water in some cases. You can check, the EPA will list your locality and tell you if there's aluminum in the water. If you're unsure, you can get a reverse osmosis filter that will remove it, or get a big jug of bottled water to deliver your home. There's never any aluminum in any of the bottled waters. Aluminum cookware, if it's got a coating so the aluminum doesn't touch the food, you're fine. If you're taking an antacid, get one of the ones that doesn't have aluminum. So if it turns out that aluminum was never a problem, you haven't done yourself any harm by avoiding it. But there are a lot of researchers who are looking at aluminum, iron, copper. Of those three, I have to say that the neuroscientist's principal suspect is now copper. Okay, the question is, what about copper, like if you have a copper bracelet for, first of all, I'm not so sure those have much benefit other than decorative. However, to my understanding, I am not aware that copper does go through the skin. Now with aluminum, aluminum does go through the skin. If you're using a deodorant, the deodorants don't have aluminum in them, but if it's labeled antiperspirant, they add aluminum, and that actually does go through the skin. So I would be surprised if copper jewelry causes copper to enter the bloodstream.
have there been any studies in regards to the water that we drink in relation to Alzheimer's?
Okay, do you mean that?
Should we drink?
As I was mentioning a couple minutes ago, studies in England did show that there's a risk. Now, by the way, when water comes down the river, it really doesn't have much aluminum in it. But it's added at the filtration plant to precipitate out solids, and then you have to remove the aluminum in turn. And if they leave it in there, then you're going to have more aluminum, and that has been associated with Alzheimer's risk. Well, the problem with it is it's solubilized. For whatever reason, it appears that you get a lot of bang for your buck with aluminum in the water. So I would avoid aluminum-containing water, and if you're unsure, I would either, you can get a reverse osmosis filter. Those are, it's not the little one that you clip on your faucet. This is the big one that goes underneath the sink. Yeah, you can often detect these minerals in there. And that's why I suggest, I don't mean to indict anyone's source of water, and I don't mean to make a controversy about it. All I'm saying is, when it comes to something like Alzheimer's disease, don't take a chance. When you look at all the bottled water, I've looked at every single brand. I have never seen one that has aluminum in it or significant amounts of any of these harmful minerals. Some of them do, well, some of them will actually add a little calcium or other things because I think that improves the taste. But if so, they write it on there, on the label, so you can see it. So my suggestion is err on the side of caution. By the way, speaking of erring on the side of caution, and I know we got to run, you might be thinking, well, do I really want to do this? Keep in mind that the choices and risks we take for ourselves are not necessarily the risks you want to take for somebody you love, like your children. So now is the time to really embrace a healthy diet, test it out, have fun with it.